So we have a quorum, and I am going to call this meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Task Force for Friday, March 12th to order. And it is 1:10 p.m. And we're going to start with an introduction. Sheila Delgado is going to introduce our new director of OEQS. Sheila?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Michael Gagne is joining us. He started last week on March the 3rd. He has over 30 years of environmental quality and sustainability experience. 16 of those years were with the city of Fort Worth. He has a broad understanding of city government and the environmental complexities. His passion for local government started in '98 when he became part of the city of Fort Worth at the environmental management department. And he was over city environmental compliance as well as city facilities compliance. And most recently, Michael had been the vice president of environmental operations for a local consulting firm. And he focused on due diligence for property development, as well as assisting industry operations to exceed the Clean Water Act standards. And Mr. Gagne grew up in Dallas, so he knows the territory. He holds a bachelor's degree in marine science from Texas A&M at Galveston, and he also has a master's degree in environmental science from UNT. Please join us in welcoming him, and this is his first task force meeting, so we are excited to have him.
Thank you, Sheila. Michael, would you like to say a few words?
I'll keep it.
I hope you don't mind if I call you Michael, because we're pretty informal around here.
No, I take no offense to Michael at all.
Okay.
Thanks for welcoming me, task force members. I appreciate it. You know, it's been a quick 10 days here at the city. Like Sheila mentioned, I did grow up in Dallas. I'm pretty familiar. I've done a lot of different things. In high school, I actually volunteered down at the Brady Center here in downtown Dallas, doing things there. Played a lot of golf down in Cedar Crest Golf Course, south of downtown. So I've been around a little bit. I appreciate being here. I'm looking forward to it all. There's a lot of great things going on. It's just a real effort to get caught up and up the speed with everything y'all are keeping us on in the lane and moving forward on. So I do appreciate all that.
Well, good. Thank you and welcome. We're all welcoming you to Dallas. Okay, thank you. And you know, we're going to, I don't think we have any public comments. Sue or Katie, do we have any public comments today?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. As far as the approval of minutes from our February 12th and then our special called meeting on February 19th, if there's no disagreement, I would like to hold consideration of approval of those two sets of minutes until our April meeting. I apologize, but I did not have a chance to read them this morning. I was so busy, and I think minutes are important, so I don't want to just kind of blow them off and approve them without really looking at them. Does anybody have any concerns about us just putting off consideration of those two sets of minutes until next time? Okay, hearing none, that's what we're going to do. And then let's go right into our presentation on the Urban Forest Master Plan. And Sue Alvarez is going to give that presentation together with Zach Wirtz, who's with the Texas Trees Foundation. And Sue and Zach, if you guys are ready.
I am ready. Can you see my desktop?
We can see you.
Okay, I think we're opening. I also want to welcome Norm Daly, who is also joining us from Texas Trees today. He's here to listen in. I think he's going to be trying to step into Zach's very large shoes. because Zach is going to be leaving us for Chicago sometime next week.
Oh.
And I want to say that we have really appreciated working with Zach and with the Texas Trees thus far on this project. And I look forward to working with Norm and obviously Jeanette as we move forward. I am not seeing the presentation.
We can see the cover sheet.
I'm seeing
Oh,
it.
you can?
Sue,
It's
it
there,
looks
Susan.
like
It's there, Susan.
it's
But I
in
can't
present-
see it. Can you see
Oh.
it now?
No, we're
No,
seeing you now.
It was in presentation
All right,
mode.
can you see it now?
No.
Ah.
It
Okay,
looks like
go ahead, Katie.
it looks like it was in presentation mode, so it was in Teams. So if you do whatever you did before, you'll just want to reopen your Teams window and you can control the presentation from there. There's like 2 different ways to share your screen now, which makes it
Okay, so can you see it now?
not yet.
No.
Aw.
So when you click the share content, there will be windows to the left and then there'll be windows to the right under PowerPoint. And
Okay,
if you, there you go, here it comes.
all right.
There it is.
Yay, I love technology. I do. Okay, so we have,
I don't.
can y'all see it? Just checking one last time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Yes.
So, as Sandy nicely introduced both myself and Zach, we've been working on this for probably, gosh, almost 2 years, to be honest, between scoping and getting it kicked off. And so I'm excited to bring it forward for your information and comment and suggestions. We had an earlier meeting this morning with some of the what I call tree folk in the departments that have tree operations, got some of their comments. And so this is very much a work in progress at this point, and I'm happy to share it with you. So I'm going to be providing just a little bit of background on how we got this far, some programmatic information, and then I'm going to turn it over to Zach, who will provide a quick overview of the Urban Forest Master Plan. I say quick because it's like 150 pages long, so it's not a it's a pretty good sized document, and a lot of people have worked really hard to bring it forward, and I'm excited to share it with you. So Dallas has been working on tree policies since the 80s, and as you know, as we look in the public sphere, the lands that we manage are also regulated under federal, state, and other local regulations. And within the city, different departments have different pieces of this regulatory authority. And these are just some of the places where we address trees. So initially we had Article 10 back in the 80s that focused primarily on protection and preservation of trees. We've had several updates over the years. One of the first major changes was in 2017 when the transition happened between looking at tree preservation to tree conservation. So that was a little bit different. Article 10 was updated formally in 2018. And then again in September of 2020 after the tornadoes, so that we could allow replanting of trees on private property after documented storm damage. In both cases, one section of the ordinance included language relative to developing and implementing an urban forest master plan. So here we are. One of the other places where this shows up is in the infamous CCAP that's in the world of this task force, and it fits on the action related to increasing tree canopy in both private and public lands and implementing the urban forest master plan. And as you know, typically you have to complete and adopt a plan before you implement it. So we're working along that pathway. And Dallas is really fortunate. We have a lot of good friends and a lot of good partners outside the city. We have formal appointed boards like the CBC Park Board, of course, this task force, the Urban Forest Advisory Committee that has been around for a little bit. And then we have a lot of really good friends that are nonprofits that we were very grateful for their help, advice, etc. Texas Trees is one of those, what I would call a very important partner. And then we work with other agencies like the Corps, Texas Forest Service is working with us on Emerald Ash Borer, Texas Park and Wildlife, etc. So we have a lot of tree-related initiatives going on right now. We do a lot of tree planting programs, both on public and private property. We also, through the extreme weather events in 2019, both with the straight line wind event in June and the October tornadoes, we lost a lot of canopy across a pretty wide part of the city. And so those events really highlighted the desires of our partners to begin really pushing on getting these formalized planning documents in place. So the Texas Trees Foundation reached out to the city manager's office in late 2018 and developed a scope for and found some funding, both from their own funding sources, also Encore Electric and Lyda Hill. And we kicked in some funding out of the Reforestation Fund to do this plan. That was because our friends at Texas Trees wanted the city to have some skin in the game. And we were happy to have that help. The city manager's office turned around and delegated management of this to the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And so that's, if you have questions on why we're the ones bringing this forward, that's why, because we were delegated. And we've had an exciting journey bringing this forward. The project was initiated through some technical advisory committees. We had both internal and external advisors, including the departments that have operations related to trees. And then the external focus groups included like the American Society of Landscape Architects, tree professionals, several other organizations that have a strong interest in what we do with our green space. We did have public surveys. We did not get as much input into those surveys as we would have liked to have, but it was in the middle of a pandemic. And that's why this project is running a little bit behind. We originally had planned to have it completed probably about a year ago. But we tried to get people to provide us some input into what they wanted to see moving forward relative to trees in Dallas. We've had a lot of review on this draft over about a 2-year period. And this latest round is like the 6th time that we have provided it to staff for their input, because it's critically important that we have input from those departments that will be implementing this plan ultimately. And there we go. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach. He has the cool part of this.
Thanks, Susan. If you want to just hop to the next slide. Awesome. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today and allowing us to do this presentation for you. So as you just heard, my name is Zach Wirtz, and I'm the Urban Forestry Manager for the Texas Trees Foundation, but I'm also a Dallas resident. And today I want to take you for a walk through my neighborhood to show you why you should care about trees in your city. And the next slide, please, Sue. Perfect. So I live in an apartment just outside of Deep Ellum with my wife and my dog. So we regularly go on walks, like many people that live where we do, to get out and get some exercise. So when we leave our block and cross the street, we find ourselves here in the Meadows District on Swiss Avenue. The canopy in this neighborhood is lush. It overhangs the sidewalks and the streets. It's very cool, comfortable, and inviting. Next slide, please. So as we head northeast to our local park, we hit sections of roads like this. So imagine what that spot feels like in August, with the sun blasting down and no real shade to be found. So we hurry along to find relief from the heat. Next slide, please. Sue, can we go to the next? Oh, perfect, thanks. So eventually we reach Exall Park, which is our safe haven of green in the gray, where we can walk in the shade of trees planted long before we were born. So our walk exemplifies a typical situation in Dallas with far too much heat and far too little shade. This issue of heat affects everyone that lives in Dallas and is just one of the problems that we can help tackle using trees. Next slide, please. So I think there's a pretty good delay. So, okay, there we go. So today I want to introduce you to the challenges and show you how to help. And I may be preaching to the choir a little bit here, but then I'm going to talk about Dallas's first ever urban forest master plan, which is a strategic guiding document that will help the city to manage its important asset. And finally, I'll share some perspectives on moving that plan forward towards success. We can go to the next. Perfect. You can go one more, Sue. Thanks. So to begin, I want to share a little bit about the Texas Trees Foundation. So since 1982, TTF has served as a catalyst in creating green in North Texas. We do this through research, planning, education, and mobilizing the public with a focus on the benefits that trees and urban forests provide to people. Next slide, please. So as you know, Dallas faces many challenges, including being one of the hottest cities in the country, its explosive development and growth rate, and poor air quality. Through this master planning process, we had a chance to ask Dallas residents what they wanted from their trees in their communities, and they echoed these issues, saying they want trees to reduce temperatures, improve quality of life, and enhance health and wellness. Additionally, we face challenges from pests and disease like the emerald ash borer, which has been a hot topic in our discussions lately as well. Go to the next slide, please. So one of the major issues at hand is that of the urban heat island effect. This occurs when impervious surfaces like roads, buildings, and sidewalks heat up during the day and then slowly release that heat over time, which can create an increase in overall temperatures. Over 35% of the surface area in Dallas is covered with these impervious surfaces, and our urban areas can be as much as 15 degrees hotter than surrounding rural areas. What we find is that areas like parks and other green spaces reduce the effect of this urban heat. This reduction of heat can be literally life-saving for some of our more vulnerable populations. Next slide, please. So now that we know a little bit about the challenges, let's talk opportunity. I want to get everyone on the same page with some of the terminology I'll be using throughout this presentation. So many people don't realize that they live in a forest, but often we do. We live in what's called the urban forest, and this is the woody and associated vegetation, basically plants, in urban and suburban settings. So what I'm talking about here are the ecosystems within and around urban areas. And I like to think of forests as a gradient, from those rural to the suburban, and then all the way down to the urban core. So when I say urban forests, I'm talking about parks, trees along streets, river corridors, nature preserves, etc. So naturally following is the definition of urban forestry or urban forest management, which focuses on managing trees in urban communities for the benefits that trees provide, which we'll explore shortly. Next slide. Okay. So in Dallas, as of 2019, 32% of the city area is covered in tree canopy. That equates to just over 14 million trees, half of which are located in the Great Trinity Forest. This issue of distribution of canopy is pretty significant. As you can see on this canopy map, there are large areas of pink, non-vegetated land across Dallas. These areas also coincide with those areas of highest heat from a few slides ago. We already have some goals for our trees outlined in CCAP, which calls for an increase in canopy cover over the next 2 decades. Next slide. So I want to make a quick aside to mention the Great Trinity Forest. Oh, Sue, if you want to go back one. At over 6,000 acres, it's an enormous forest resource for the city. And that said, it's managed differently and by different entities, such as that Army Corps of Engineers, than the rest of Dallas. The Trinity's management is dictated by the 2008 management plan written for that area, and it's not covered under this new master plan. And that's because its management needs need to be specifically tailored to its ecology and other needs which can differ greatly from those of, for example, street and park trees. Next slide, please. So back to trees and opportunities. Trees provide a myriad of benefits to people, including temperature regulation, stormwater control, air purification, and improved human health outcomes, and increased property values. So urban forests enhance economic development by attracting new business and retaining existing ones. Importantly, trees are a capital asset for the city that, unlike other assets such as roads, actually accrue value as they age. Our older, larger trees generally produce more benefits. Next slide, please. So for some of these benefits, we can actually ascribe a dollar value. The trees in Dallas provide nearly $240 million in benefits every year, and as a whole are worth over $9 billion in structural value. Trees are also critical to control heat in urban settings. So TTF's 2017 Heat Island Management Study found that expanding tree canopy cover is the most effective strategy available for urban heat management. Adding trees along with other efforts like reflective roofing can reduce temperatures by up to 15 degrees. So I don't know about you, but to me, a 90-degree forecast is a lot more appealing than one of 105 degrees. Can you go to the next? So all of this information has been informed by TTF's work in Dallas over the last decade, specifically the 2015 State of the Dallas Urban Forest Report and its 2019 Canopy Study Update, and the 2017 Urban Heat Island Management Study. So these reports inform and set up the new Dallas Urban Forest Master Plan. Next slide. And you can go one more, please. Perfect. So while trees are an important solution in helping to address the challenges facing Dallas, they can only be effective if their care, management, and preservation become a priority. The Dallas Urban Forest Master Plan serves as a guide to make this happen by providing additional insights into the current state of Dallas's urban forest and outlining recommendations and actions to proactively manage, care for, protect, and grow the city's tree canopy cover. It provides a shared vision for the future of the urban forest to inspire us all to plant, care for, and protect Dallas's trees. Next slide. So this plan was born out of collaboration, as Sue had mentioned. So having received funding for the plan from the Lyda Hill Philanthropies and Encore, TTF teamed up with the City of Dallas, who also contributed funding, and contracted the Davie Resource Group to write the plan. We also brought together as many different players in the Dallas urban forest as we could to serve as a technical advisory committee to help inform and drive the process. We engaged in focus groups with key stakeholders, including the City of Dallas Urban Forestry Advisory Committee, all the city departments that deal with trees, other local NGOs, and private tree care companies. Additionally, we sought input from the Dallas community to ensure that this plan reflected their needs. All of this information was used within indicators of sustainable urban forestry assessment that was developed by Davie to tell us where we are and where we can improve. So throughout the plan, we use an adaptive management approach as well. Next slide, please. Through the input and engagement activities, the community and stakeholders identified a set of urban forestry priorities and themes for the City of Dallas. These priorities and themes, along with the assessment of indicators of a sustainable urban forest, established the initial foundation of the plan. During the analysis of the data, information, and stakeholder input, a series of 5 overarching guiding principles emerged that helped to set the plan's direction and solidify its foundation. The goals, recommendations, and action steps of the Dallas Urban Forest Master Plan were developed based on these priorities, themes, and guiding principles identified during the plan development process. They focus on improving and growing Dallas's urban forest and making trees a priority. The recommendations were ranked by the Technical Advisory Committee based on implementation. However, no matter where a recommendation is ranked, its implementation is an important piece in making trees a priority and ensuring that Dallas's urban forest is equitable, sustainable, and resilient. Next slide, please. So the goals of the plan are to create a healthy, equitable, resilient forest through proper planning and implementation to protect and grow canopy, achieve the CCAP canopy cover goals, and engage the community. So there are 14 recommendations in this plan, and I'm just going to highlight the top 3 for time's sake. So each recommendation has a short-term target, time frame, and action steps to accomplish the recommendation. The top 3 priority recommendations are: number 1, to complete a comprehensive inventory of trees on rights-of-way and in parks. Number 2, to centralize the city's urban forestry programs and activities. And number 3, to develop a storm response and recovery plan. So to wrap up all of this information, we've now briefed the Environmental and Sustainability Committee and the Park Board on this master plan. Moving forward, a citywide tree task force has been formed to work on the implementation of the plan itself. We're briefing this task force now and asking the ENVS committee to recommend this plan for City Council adoption, hopefully with your support. So Dallas isn't getting any cooler. Its air can be hard to breathe, and its development's moving quickly. And it's affecting everyone: constituents, schools, businesses. So we now have a plan to enhance the urban forest and help to solve Dallas's challenges. A huge amount of effort from Dallas has gone into the writing of this plan, but really we're here to see the implementation, and much more work lies ahead. We need you guys to all become champions of the urban forest and to proactively pursue the action laid out in this master plan. This will ensure the capital resource is cared for and grown. Ownership, momentum, and long-term investment is critical to making this plan work. Trees must become a major priority for Dallas if we're to tackle all the issues we face. And they have to stay a priority, not just a short-term trend. All too often, the urban forest is treated not as an asset, but relegated as a luxury, or worse, a hindrance to other land uses and infrastructure. To accomplish the goals set in this plan, trees must be recognized for their full inherent monetary, health, and cultural values. City decision makers have to recognize these values in the context of the decisions made around funding allocations, infrastructure, zoning, and development, and trees have to become a priority for city decision makers in order to ensure the health and longevity of the urban forest. This master plan lays out 14 recommendations with suggested action steps and timelines for the city to create a more resilient, well-managed, and sustainable urban forest. Without increased cohesive support, trees will continue to be an afterthought, and the city of Dallas may miss a really extraordinary opportunity to enhance the lives and health of its residents through green infrastructure. With challenges such as climate change, poor air quality, and rapid development looming on Dallas's doorstep, urban forests provide a key tool to combat issues facing every Dallas decision maker and their constituents. Ultimately, without champions for the urban forest at the political and management levels in the city, opportunities and benefits of urban forestry will not be realized. Next slide, please. So Dallas is at a crossroads. Is it going to continue down a path towards intolerable outdoor summer activities, or will it respond to the challenges of a superheated city head on by managing and aggressively taking action for its urban forest so that a summer walk can be along cool, green, healthy, tree-lined streets? Tell me, which walk would you like to take? So to wrap up, I just want to really quickly acknowledge all the wonderful people that made this planning process the success it's been, including our plan sponsors, project team, technical advisors, and contributing organizations. So I think, Sue, we can now take some questions.
Thank you, Zach, for that. You know, I would just like to comment, you know your slide, Zach, where you went for a walk along Swiss Avenue and then Live Oak? I think one of the problems, if you look at your Live Oak slide, are those brand new buildings, they're not even done yet, looming over the street with a small setback. I don't think there's even enough room to plant a tree there if you wanted to plant a tree there. I think that's one of our big problems in Dallas is that we don't allow room for enough landscaping and green space as we're putting in new developments. Those buildings just loom over Live Oak Street.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that plays a lot into that issue of trees not being a priority during development.
Right. I mean, when we have tried in the past to have bigger setbacks, we get so much pushback from developers who feel as though you're taking away too much of their property and putting it into green space, and they want to have that building envelope that is huge. And so what you get and what you end up with are those big tall buildings looming over the street. And you can't even have a wide enough sidewalk, much less plant trees. And so I think that's something that I wish we could tackle here. And it's just going to take, this realization that trees and green space are every bit as important as putting up that building right next to the street. It's just a matter of priorities. And so far, most of the time, we choose the building envelope over the treescape. So, and it's going to be a battle royal to try and get bigger setbacks, but I think it would be worth the fight. So anyway, that's just my first comment. Who else would like to, does anyone else have any comments? I don't see any hands up.
Araman has his hand up.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hey all. Hey Zach. Thanks for coming by. I'm sad to hear that you're moving on, but you know, I'm sure it's for the best. So congrats. I wanted to ask, this is kind of, I watched the task force meeting, or not the task force, the council committee meeting, and I think there was some good information shared there that I want to make sure everyone on the task force knows. So maybe this is a staff question, but we have a tree fund in Dallas, which is money specifically for trees. And I'm just wondering if you could give the ballpark estimate of how much money is in that fund.
I believe Phil Irwin's on the call and probably is the best person to answer that question.
Hello, this is Phil Irwin, Chief Arborist with Sustainable Development and Construction. Currently, I don't have an exact number, but I know that the estimate has been placed over $7.5 million.
Awesome, perfect. I think that's good enough for our purposes. And then I think in the meeting, there were also some questions about typically, and certainly it varies every year, but typically how much money comes into that fund each year and typically how much money goes out. Can you share those just, again, completely ballpark numbers with us?
Well, that's a little complicated. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but typically on funds going out, it would be around $150,000 per year on tree plantings over the last several years. This year, I would add that council has approved the purchase of a land using the fund for $2.5 million for 83-acre land down in southern Dallas. So that's going to offset that number for this year. Now, as far as income, usually we're actually looking at, I think the last year we had $1 million, a little over $1 million come into the fund. Before that, typically it's about $750,000 to $750,000 to $800,000 per year.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, and I think just the kind of the takeaway I'm hoping folks have is we have a tree fund. It's specifically to help plant or protect trees, and right now we have more money on an average year that comes into the fund than goes out. And so I just think that's helpful context for folks to know. One other thing I'm curious about is just in terms of OEQS staffing and staffing across other departments as well. I know there's like a tree task force, but I'm wondering, like, is there a specific department that coordinates that task force? Is there like a urban forestry focus team that like all they do is coordinate all the tree related roles in the city of Dallas? If someone could comment on the staff structure, that would be helpful.
I would say that's TBD. My understanding is Joey Zapata, who is also on this call, has a plan to meet with those departments that have tree operations to determine what that looks like going forward. And also, so it'd be governments and implementation for this plan. Joey, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Sue. Excuse me. Good answer. And yes, as I said to the committee when we had that meeting, it's a recommendation, and we take it for the value that it adds. We understand that the intent is to have a more centralized decision making on when it comes to matters affecting the urban forest. The challenge for us, I'll say it again, is just that no one department controls all the trees. You've got them spread between the Trinity, the parks, the rights of way, and on private property. So we see the recommendation in the Urban Forest Master Plan, and we would take that into consideration so that management could make a recommendation for a future budget. But we recognize very strongly the need for stronger, more centralized coordination, and feel that the master plan is one way to get there, where we're all kind of pushing in the same direction and meeting and communicating regularly to get there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that info. And I guess where my head is going based on what I've come to understand is I'd be really interested in us taking a look at potentially using some of that tree fund money if needed to create a centralized department. Because I think having a group that is just keeping its eye on all of those things and coordinating across all those city departments could be really helpful. And I also think it would provide like regular funding that isn't, not having to be worked out in the budget all the time. And I also know that there are, different, like there's this rule about planting trees in medians, and I can never remember the exact rule, but I know it's potentially challenging to plant trees in medians, and partially it's because we don't want to plant trees that are going to die, but at the same time we're not planting trees where we could. And just having folks who have a broader understanding of the city who could look at that and try to find a solution would be helpful. So yeah, I guess I would love for us as a task force to potentially look at that. I think that's what Councilmember West asked for, and I'd be interested in being part of that and wanted folks to have kind of my high level view and share some context. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Armin. I would like to say that I agree with Armin. I think we need a more centralized structure to address the attention on trees. The one that is, that is what is recommended in this plan that we're hearing about today. And I think that's a good idea. I think it's too spread out. And I understand what Joey Zapata is saying, but I still think we need a more centralized structure for that. Joey, I would like to ask you, who are the external stakeholders on this city tree task force? They said there's internal and external stakeholders. Who are the external stakeholders?
I will ask for some help from staff to list them. I can't possibly list them all, but I will say it's who you would probably mostly expect. And those that are listed, I think, a lot in the Urban Forest Master Plan document itself. But with that, I'll ask Sue or anybody else on the call from water, parks, etc., to help me fill that in. Or here we go.
So
thank you.
I would say that a pretty good handful of the folks involved are on this slide. Obviously, a committee of that many people is not likely to be very workable. And like everything else we do, I would hope that we would have a diverse task force moving forward so that we accurately recommend or basically reflect the communities that we're serving. Obviously, the professional groups, and then there are some very active and very helpful nonprofits. Texas Trees comes to mind, Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Land, the Master Naturalists. So we have a lot of very involved, a lot of very engaged stakeholders in this realm of what we're doing as a city. I don't know that we have established that task force yet, but we have a whole bunch of people that we could certainly pull in.
And if I may, Mrs. Grayson, let me also add that to Sue's point, we are still, these are who we expect to be asking. This is the commitment that we made to establish this bigger citywide task force, we call it. One of the things that we're discussing, and we'll be talking with you and Chairman Narvaez more directly offline, but we think that it makes sense that this group ultimately be something that rolls up under the new commission. So we will have further discussions with you about that, about at least having some sort of buy-in. And I'm thinking of other examples like on the Arts and Culture Advisory Commission. They have public art committee, for example. And that is something that's created, or I believe that it's nominated by the chair and the rest of the board or commission approves it. So there's an example, if I have that accurate, of how you might have an external group that is also has some tie-in to the new commission and this task force currently. But we'll be talking.
Maybe the new commission would want to have a standing committee on this to oversee this. I think that would be a great idea. Thank you, Joy. You know what I was kind of more looking for too, though, is an opportunity for members of the public. I looked at this list just now and I see Friends of Oak Cliff Parks. That's the sort of thing I guess I was thinking of, is giving groups who have neighborhood activities, neighborhood activists, people who are really interested in their neighborhoods and all around the city, have an opportunity to participate in this if they wanted to.
Yes.
Because I'm not seeing much in the way of just the average citizen having an opportunity. And I know you can't have an enormous committee. I know that doesn't work. But I'm just not seeing opportunities here for average citizens who are interested in this to be able to have a say-so.
And if I may, so again, these discussions are still ongoing and we'll be communicating more in the coming weeks. I'd say before the end of April, we should have a little bit more clarity on where we're headed. But another thing that we're discussing, to your point, is having a core steering or executive committee that has leadership from major organizations, but then also as part of that, having a larger advisory committee that meets a little bit less frequently, but also rolls up under that. And again, I'm borrowing from arts and culture, where when we adopted the cultural plan, City Council adopted the cultural plan, they had a 40+ member steering committee, and they did the same thing, where they've maintained that larger body as a sounding board or a focus group to continue periodic meetings and giving them engagement and opportunities for input.
Well, good. I just hope you're looking at some models that give folks an opportunity to participate, because I think it's important. And not just have them come as the council is getting ready to vote on it, but have actually an opportunity for them to participate at an earlier point where their input would make a difference. So, Alan had his hand up, and then Rita.
I agree with what's been said. I want to support what Armin was saying. I think if we have a coordinated direction, maybe under this commission for the addressing of the planting and the maintenance and overseeing the maintenance and planting of new trees. I think right now, and I think it's my understanding, we have these funds, $7.5 million in reserve. I would love to see those funds be gone and spent on trees, because I would love to see carbon reduced and the trees. But my understanding is, I'm not sure the city owns water trucks and some of the actual infrastructure needed to maintain it. It might be that we consider some of the maybe what happens over at White Rock Lake as a model for the love of the lake and a lot of the citizen participation in terms of the maintenance of the perimeter of the lake. The entire lake is policed and trash is picked up. And this could be kind of a clearinghouse through the commission and a subcommittee that would address a planting plan and follow the plan that's been adopted, that we're looking at right now, and coordinate a plan maybe with some staff that would be needed for just water trucks and or a public partnership with the nonprofits that are currently doing this very same thing in the marketplace. I think Jeanette Monier could speak to that, and so that we could really have a concerted effort that's really directed and effective.
Thank you, Alan. Rita?
Sorry about that. This may not be for our urban forester person, but we do have city staff on here, so I just want to bring this up. I think it's wonderful that we have funds for planting trees, and of course we need that, and we need to keep our Trinity Forest intact as much as possible. And we also know the legislature has said some things about local control and trying to get developers to not cut down trees. But have we done anything as a city to incentivize or use a carrot? Because we can go ahead and plant trees, but if developers or builders are clear cutting trees on site, those are mature trees that take years to get back. So is there anything being done about that?
That is
Sue,
probably
or-
a good question for Phil Irwin, because he's the one that usually works with those developers.
Hello. Yes, we have been working on that very issue in the 2018 Article 10 provisions. That ordinance is built very much on incentives. And one of the mitigation measures that are in there is a sustainable development incentives process, which has not yet been implemented because no one has taken it on. The concept for that is that you try to develop with the land, with what's on the property, versus scraping it clear and just going to based on what engineering can fulfill on the maximum amount of land area. So the intent is to build sustainable. So we have the mechanism to try to implement this, but it's based on incentives. But we also have to have the motivation of the developers and the zoning regulations to work with it.
Well, I would like to see, you know, this CCAP or commission going forward. If there's a way to help on that to get this done, I would like to see that happen. So there's my 2 cents.
Here, I agree. Alan, I saw your hand up again.
I think Jeanette had her hand up first, but I was just going to piggyback on something that Phil was discussing and Rita mentioned. So if you'd like to go with Jeanette first, that's fine.
Jeanette, please.
Well,
Go ahead.
I want to just say that $7.5 million sounds like a lot of money, but we have, even just to break even, we've got to put in, I think, and Zach, you can help me, just to get us to where we need to go, we've got to put in over 250,000 trees. Plus, we're losing trees to EAB. So the average tree to get it in the ground on a public right-of-way is about $250. So that's 30,000 trees. So everybody wants to utilize these monies, but my concern is that we'll use it or divert it for other things, and we won't end up having money for trees.
Yeah.
The Texas Trees Foundation brings to the city of Dallas close to $500,000 a year for tree planting from private sources. So that can offset this, but until we get to the point where we have a tree planting plan, which we're working on right now, we're not going to be able to kind of say, well, let's just use this money for this or that. And the other thing to remember is that the majority of the tree source is in southern Dallas, and that's where the majority of new development is going to be. So we're going to be challenged to plant enough trees, and we're going to be challenged to plant the right tree, the right place, the right way over time. So if we can get this plan in place, we can get a plan out of the city. There are a lot of nonprofits and people that can help kind of supplement some of these things. And not only, you've got the urban forestry master plan now, but now you need a management plan. And so this 7.5 million is not a lot of money for trees. And I just wanted to bring that up because if we open it up, it's opened up right now. They just spent 2.5 million to purchase land for park and recreation. It's opened up to public properties for tornadoes. And ever since I've been here, people have wanted to get their hands on this money, but we have to be really careful how that money is expended if we're going to direct it to urban forestry.
So Jeanette, I'd like to ask you, there's been a proposal raised that we use some of the money from the reforestation fund to irrigate trees planted on private property. I am concerned that that is going to use up money very quickly. And are you all okay with that proposal to start using the money for irrigation?
So in the branching out program with the city of Dallas, this is how we do it. We raise funds for the project, we pay for the irrigation, and the trees come from the city. If in fact the trees didn't come from the city, I will tell you that those projects are too much to fundraise for. So that's how we do it. We fundraise, and usually our funding is going in for irrigation and all of these park plantings that we do every year, which I think is about 15 or 20 plantings a year or more. Zach, you might be able to chime in on that, but so it's not just about the city putting money in, it's about the city looking at how they can help us put together a plan for other resources to be brought to the city to support Sandy, things like the irrigation. Because, you know, we're working on a park right now and I'm fundraising for the irrigation, but the trees have got to come from the mitigation fund. But $7.5 million isn't a ton of money when you start looking what the cost is to get a tree in the ground and manage it.
I agree. I'm just afraid that it's 7 million seems like a lot of money, but it can disappear very quickly.
It can.
Thank you, Jeanette. Alan, and then Tracy.
Yeah, I want to support Jeanette on that. My intention in my comments was not to go grab that money for anything else other than the support of a plan that's going to get more trees in the ground. That's all. And for nothing else, I'm not in favor of using those funds for anything other than that. I just think that the city, along with this plan, needs to put as a priority, and this commission could be that entity, to make it a priority that we see more trees getting in the ground. We set up the tools and the mechanisms for that to happen. And also on the development side, I have a problem with the level of density where we see an apartment complex coming up to a sidewalk and there's absolutely no place to put a tree in a 2 or 3 foot median between the street and the sidewalk. I am in favor, and this will probably make some head explodes in neighborhoods around the city. And look, if the developer has to have a certain number of units to make it, we need housing. That's our other big competing problem. If a developer needs for the math to work, and there's ways to determine this on an equitable national level on what it's costing to do projects, but the reality is if we give and require deeper setbacks so that we can get more trees on the ground, let's give them some height. Let's have some taller buildings. Let's go up. Look at a city like Toronto. Toronto has clusters of high rises all over the city. And, you know, when we have neighborhoods coming out, you know, regularly with pitchforks and torches to the city council horseshoe, complaining about the fact that the high rise is going in and they're going to put in, my God, horrifically low income $400,000 condos on Northwest Highway, and then the neighborhood's going to be ruined because of it. We have to stop that. There's got to be some political will for the reality that we've got to have some density that's going to allow for a bigger tree canopy on the ground, put the setbacks back, but give some density. Give us an option. This is a very complex issue with regard to zoning and neighborhoods.
It is complex and it is controversial. I mean, trading height and density for setbacks, all of that, there are folks that have very strong opinions on all of that. And you're right, neighborhoods generally do not like density, do not like height, want more green space. So the trade-offs are difficult. They are very difficult. But I do think it's something that needs to be looked at so that you don't have what we see there in Zach's slides on Live Oak.
There's no place to plant a tree.
There is no place to plant a tree.
On the balconies? I mean,
Well, they plant some tiny little bushes along some tiny little sidewalk, and that is not doing it for providing shade or greenery. It's just not enough. But it's all that there's room for.
And I get that there are developers out there that want to get every last square inch of land with a building on it. Well, there's a way to maybe finesse this situation and say, look, we know how many units do you need to build for this to economically be viable? Can you design a bit? You're already going, if you're going already above four stories, which is a frame building, if they're already going to 6 to 8, they're already doing a masonry building. It becomes economical for them to go a little taller. So that's a conversation I think we all need to have, and you know, I'm a big fan of what's happened in Toronto with regard to the development clusters, and you know, you put tall buildings with park around it, and they're not looking in somebody's backyard. You know, that's just.
Well, we need to have that conversation, and I hope we do. We've tried to tackle it in the past. It's so controversial that we start it and then back away from it. So,
Sandy, if you remember in Article 10, there is an incentive for builders and developers. If they put in green infrastructure, it offsets some of what they have to put into the mitigation fund.
yeah, I
We
do
built
know.
that.
Right, we do have some improvements in Article 10 that came in recently. And maybe these buildings on Live Oak were started or planned before we made those improvements. But I just think it's such a glaring example of how we can do better. So, Tracy, you had your hand up.
I'm just popping back to what Rita was talking about, the preemptive culture in the state legislature. I love this plan. Those of us who study and know about climate change, this is necessary. And with building, I mean, there is not an opportunity in that culture for cities to have teeth in the plan. And when the person from the city was speaking, saying that, you know, we need to motivate developers and offer incentives. Okay, so what is that beyond what Jeanette just mentioned as incentive for builders to not take down our already mature trees? And so I just feel like our hands are really tied here, and we're going to be doing this great effort laid out in the plan. It's going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back if we're taking down our already mature trees for development. So we need to dig into some sort of innovation. What can be done? We need to dig down deeper into what motivating a developer means.
It usually means the developer wants as much as he can get. I'm sorry for all the developers listening out there, but that's kind of what we found. So like, again, there's trade-offs, and we should be talking about those. I think this is a perfect topic and subject to be within the purview of the Environmental Commission when it's formed. I really do. I hope that they participate vigorously in this, because we'll have the right people on that commission to do this.
It's extremely discouraging.
Who was saying that? Tracy, was that you?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, but maybe we can take and make it better. My hope is always that we can focus attention on something and make it better. It just takes a lot of effort and energy and time. But we'll have the people on there who are willing to devote the time to it. Ellen, I don't know if your hand was up again or if it was the hand just didn't go down.
Oh, I just meant to add one more thing. I mean, I think the thing is just creating a clear path of what can be done in terms of we have a lot of competing ideas here, and the city, you know, I'm on the building side, and I see the real need for. We need housing. We need residential housing. We need, in order for it to happen, we're also competing with the suburban markets with regard to the pathways they're allowing developers to do just outside our borders. I think we need to really look at a clear path and spell out. We've had some great tools on our tool belt already with regard to residential and density. If you've got R75 zoning, you can do shared access without going through a zoning process. I've done a small development in East Dallas with a pocket park using that technique that is really clear. It's clear what we can do. And I think we just need to put more tools in the toolbox so that developers can be guided to the right thing. You know, I'm doing it the way I'm doing it because I'm committed to what we're wanting to do as a city in terms of density and also tree canopy. But if we give a paint by number rule book so that someone knows and what is the economic viability of site and say of a site and say in stone, no uncertain terms, we're not going to change it from the rules we have for this development at this site. You can do it this way with setbacks that allow for trees and give a certain amount of density. I know there's some incentives for department developers if they go green by they can reduce parking. They can reduce, there's some incentives there, but they're just, I don't think they're enough. Honestly, I think we need to do more, not in terms of incentives, in terms of what we require to see be happening on the ground. We really have to have a clear understanding of what we want to see on the ground. And that hopefully this commission can kind of steer that and really work with zoning, planning and zoning to get there.
I agree. Rita, did you want to say something else? I see your hand up.
Well, I just want to echo what Alan's saying, and I was wondering, has Dallas ever looked into what other cities are doing as far as incentives to builders and developers? Has there been any of that kind of analysis done in a report anywhere?
I would bet that as the revisions to Article 10 were being worked on over the last few years, that there was some effort to see what other cities comparable to us were doing. But I don't know that for a fact, but I would just guess that might be have been an effort that was part of the revisions to Article 10.
I think
Sue,
it's
do you know
that. I know that CPC is looking at it relative to updates to the development code related to parking requirements. They're very heavily looking at what other cities are doing. And that's another piece that we haven't really tackled here yet. But and I know that our friends in the Planning and Urban Design Group, as they get ready to update the Forward Dallas plan, are also looking at that type of thing. And I would suggest that that may be the appropriate place to tackle it, is in that land use plan.
Yes, those efforts are important and can be part of those efforts. Updated Forward Dallas. Yeah. Jeanette, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that they are being addressed in some of those plans. Forward Dallas and the new land use plan, they are looking at this and they're very aware of the urban forestry stuff and the need to get more trees in the ground. I also want to say that the Dallas Builders Association has been very helpful when we did Article 10 coming to the table. And I think it's going to take a group like our group to really help navigate how some of this happens to expand. But if you look at a lot of the builders now, and there's a new development, I think it's Hunt Properties or somebody over off of Field Street, they are looking at biophilia and they are looking at how to bring a lot more trees into the design. They're looking at a lot, even how to build the buildings with more kind of natural. So the market is putting pressure on these larger developers in particular, to bring in this, because the research is there now to align a kind of evidence-based design with health and nature and humans and people. And so it's happening. It's already happening in Dallas. Sometimes we just don't pay attention or we don't know about it.
Thank you, Jeanette. Um, I still see Alan's and Rita's hands up. And do you have some other comments you want to make?
Ariman's had his hand up for a few minutes. Ariman and Rita both have their hands up.
Alan?
I thought I'm good. I don't think I took my hand down. But I agree with everything Annette was saying, and I think we need to move forward with a plan.
Okay, Armin?
Yes, thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I think, Jeanette, thank you for the context on the fund and how quickly it can go. I think that's good for us to all know as well. I think, yeah, I want us to be able to plant the trees and to use the fund effectively. And I guess maybe what would be helpful is understanding what would need to happen to do that, maybe from your perspective, Jeanette. So it sounds to me like we have this urban forest master plan, but before we spend the money effectively, we need to also create an urban forest management plan. Is that right? And then if that is correct, is there anything else we would need to do, or after that plan, would we be ready to use the fund effectively from your perspective?
I will defer that to my urban forester, who's one of the best urban foresters in the country. Zach?
Yeah, great question, Ariman. So recommendation 5 in the master plan is to produce an urban forest management plan. What that management plan would do is dictate basically the more day-to-day operations, where the master plan is a 20-25 year perspective. The management plan would be broken down into much smaller chunks that would include things like tree planting initiatives. So as Jeanette had mentioned earlier, TTF is working on creating a prioritization plan for planting in Dallas so that we can use things like the reforestation fund basically to their maximum extent. You know, we can get the most bang for our buck by targeting areas that are going to have the most significant urban forest benefits if we do plantings in those spots. So it's a bit of a stepwise process, but we're getting, as Jeanette had also mentioned, out of that planning and into some of the management. So our recommendation through the master plan is to create management plans to better guide those day-to-day operations. And part of that is that planting plan.
Our challenge, Arnhem, is if this doesn't get passed, then we don't have a pathway to help fundraise for the next plan. And so once this gets passed, then we have a better pathway to start getting funders. And we have funders waiting to take the next step. And if you look since 2010, we've been very intentional and very strategic as we've done these different studies and we've done these different fundraising, having these different fundraising, while at the same time, we're planting a lot of trees in Dallas. We are working on campuses of schools, and you're well aware of that project. We're planting average of 80 trees per campus, and we've got 7 schools this year, another 7 next year. They're creating outdoor environmental learning areas. So I want to also mention that there's going to be a lot of places where we can't plant trees because of the infrastructure, all of the pipes and all of the stuff that's underneath. So it's a complex issue, and that's why if you centralize it, it's going to be more cost effective for the city, as well as it's going to be able to get us further faster. It's economy of scale is what it is.
Yeah.
And how you approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So I just want to summarize to make sure I understand. Texas Trees for the last 10 years or so has been sort of methodically doing studies and putting plans together that are building towards, making us able to plant our trees effectively, considering all of those complexities. And the next step directly in front of us is passing this urban forest master plan. And then the step after that will be kind of fundraising for and putting together the management plan. And then once we have the management plan, we should be in a strong position to really start putting trees in the ground and caring for them well. Is that a fair summary of what you both just shared?
Yes, and in the meantime, we know that there's places where we can be planting, and we are planting. So it's not one or the other. We know right now where there are planting projects and planting opportunities, but it'll be more refined once the management plan is done.
Okay,
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah,
And one is, yeah, go for it, Zach.
That's addressed in this master plan, that you don't necessarily need to have all of those different components to start more centrally managing this system. You know, we can continue to plant while we produce those other plans, like Jeanette said, and that's a really important component to remember, is that action can still happen now. What we're doing is working towards better action in the future.
And we're racing against emerald ash borer. So we've got an issue that's coming. We know it's coming, and if we don't put some eyes on this right now, it's going to overtake us.
So the citywide tree task force is also going to address the emerald ash borer issue. Is that where it's going to get addressed?
Susan, that's your question, I guess.
And that is my understanding, is that's kind of the approach we're taking, is to use that group, because it is one very critical aspect of the urban forest that our collective group is managing. Parks has been working with the Texas Forest Service on some planning, and I anticipate that work will help give us a little bit of a kickstart. Renee, I know you're on. Do you want to add to that? Or Brett, if he's on?
Okay, I guess they don't want to add to that. Alan, I see your hand, and then I'm going to ask a question.
I just want to give kudos to the Texas Tree Foundation and what Jeanette has been working on for so many years, because I really know that having this plan and guidance for the development community is going to establish, first of all, it's going to establish a plan and an underlying understanding of what needs to be done. And I think just speaking for the building community, there's always going to be builders and developers that are going to balk. Okay, I get that. But for the most part, they want predictability, and knowing predictability is going to go to the valuation of a piece of land. And if the valuation is impacted by what needs to happen there, then they're not buying the land at an inflated price with dreams of rezoning and cutting down a canopy. They need to know that's where developers can get in trouble, is they buy a piece of land at an inflated price and they have to do something nobody wants from our perspective to make the math work. By having a plan in place, it's going to allow the development community to understand what the math is. That's it. It's just a function of math, what it's going to take, what they need, what they can buy the land for, what they can develop for. That's all. It's not a matter of, I don't think developers are willful in the desire to cut down trees and ruin the urban forest landscape. They just want to make sure that they're not going to, most developers are for-profit businesses, and they have to be able to predict what it is they have to invest in so they can generate a return. That's all. So if we can give them the predictability with a plan that's in place that the city wants to see happen, which Jeanette and the Tree Foundation has been so rigorous, and God bless you for making that happen, it needs to be adopted. Thank you.
Well, one of the things I like about this plan is its emphasis on large trees. What we used to hear in the past was, well, we'll just plant, we'll take the trees down and then we'll just plant more trees. But little baby trees don't give you the same benefits that the great big old large trees do. And that's one thing I love about this plan, is the emphasis on keeping the large trees because of all of the benefits that they provide. So I like that. I did have a question about the plan though. On the tree canopy cover, one of the goals is to go to 37%. Right now it's 32%, to go to 37% in 20 years. And I was wondering if that was an ambitious enough goal to go up 5% in 20 years.
Zach, you
I don't
want to take that or you want me to take it?
Well,
I don't know, Zach or Jeanette or Sue or
Yeah.
whoever would want to answer that. Do you feel like that's an ambitious enough number?
I'm going to half answer it and then I'm going to hand it to Susan. So the goals that are laid out in this plan are based on the goals that were established by CCAP. And so I'll let Sue comment if she'd like on how the CCAP goals were set.
And I had the
So-
same question on the CCAP when I saw it, so. Okay.
So the goals on the CCAP were based on our basic canopy growth over the last 10 years. And they also consider tree mortality and events like the tornadoes and June storms. And so we looked at basic trends on where we were and set a goal that was doable. We also looked at average urban canopy in other cities. And that is actually our ultimate goal. And to be perfectly honest, when you look at our canopy versus other major cities, we're actually on a good track. We're leading other cities in a lot of ways, including our canopy. I don't remember what the average canopy for most cities is. That might be a Forrester question, but it was based largely on looking at our own trends.
The federal goal by the USDA Forest Service is around 40% if you can reach it. And so, 37, I thought we should have set it at 40%, Sandy, because
I would like that. I mean, to me, that would be more ambitious and hopefully more doable. If you get to 37 from 32, mainly because the trees are getting bigger,
Well-
that's good. That's one component, but I don't know that it's enough.
Well, so when we did our studies, with what we found per parcel in the city of Dallas, we have 1.8 potential tree planting sites in the city, 1.8 million potential tree planting sites in the city.
Okay, 1.8 million.
We know that. So we also know that there's going to be loss. There's going to be places where we can't plant. I think this is a doable plan, and it's better to try to hit some of these goals, these benchmarks, rather than always feel like you're never going to make it. And we know that this is going to be changed over time. We're gonna go back and review this stuff after a while, especially once we get, an internal urban forestry team working on this. But I think that 37% is pretty good for where we are now, based on the planning and the kind of framework that needs to be created over the next few years anyway.
Okay, well, thank you all for the answers, because that was one thing that I was curious about. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll probably need to move on to the next item, but I thought this was fascinating, and I just think it's wonderful to have a plan out there. I hope we adopt it. Zach, I hope you like Chicago. I'm from Chicago. I hope you enjoy your time there. You will be cold most of the year, but that's okay. You'll get used to it.
Yeah, thank you.
But good luck. I hope you enjoy it. And thank you all again. And let's move on to the discussion on the task force subcommittees. Sue, that's in your bailiwick.
Let me unmute myself. So one of the things that we talked about both for the remainder of the year and as we looked at pending assignments for the Environmental Commission is we've received several requests for input. This forest master plan was one of them. But as you know, we're also looking at development codes. We're looking at emerald ash borer. We have a handful of things that we would like to maybe tackle and it's probably more things than we have time as a group. And so we wanted to entertain the discussion of maybe some subgroups to tackle some of these other potential areas where we can help our ENVS committee move forward. Our group is looking at community solar, and we're working generally with the city of Houston, but I know that we have some specialists on the task force that if they would be willing to convene a subcommittee, we would love their help. And so I just wanted to open that up for discussion on what subcommittees that you think we would and should have, with the idea of maybe folks getting together on an issue or issues and coming back to brief the larger committee. So that's one question. So which ones, and whether you would want to participate on one or more. And I'll just open it up.
And Sue, there was also a question of whether our task force members would like to participate on an issue subcommittee like the Emerald Ash Borer, the Forward Dallas Update, or would they like to do it as by section of the CCAP? Would you touch on that a little, Sue?
Sure.
That you and your staff had thought that might be an approach?
Yeah, so another approach that we talked about was to convene subcommittees that would match the 8 areas of the plan. So like an air quality committee, a green space committee, a water committee, a building committee, an energy committee. And so that would be another approach. And we're open to what you think works. Or if you don't have the time and you don't think we need it, you can tell us that too.
We had heard over the course of these meetings over the last few months, though, that a number of you were interested in some of these topic areas. I think some of you had already contacted Sue about the building code updates and being on that committee, which is, I think, underway or supposed to start soon, Sue?
I believe so. That is being handled primarily with our friends in sustainable development. And I can certainly, if we have folks that would like to be tied into that process, I'm happy to make that happen. The other major effort that we anticipate coming forward is the Forward Dallas Update. That one also is looking for community input. The other plan that we're working with out of our department is an update to the local solid waste management plan, otherwise known as Zero Waste. And our friends in sanitation would actually kind of like to come present, I think, next month. But they're interested in getting our collective feedback. So those are topics that I know are coming. And I'm open to thoughts on if you want to do that, and if so, what committees do you think would bring the most value to the city from your collective expertise?
So on the local solid waste management plan where they're coming to brief us, do they want the collective task force input, or are they going to have some ability to work with a subcommittee? Are they talking about subcommittees?
Like both. They're very much at the beginning part of that process, where they're wrestling right now. They've done the background pulling where we are and studying, kind of getting their facts together. They're getting ready to craft a community outreach effort, and they would like our internal, from our task holders input, but they would also like some guidance on moving forward relative to that outreach effort.
Well, maybe when we're briefed next month by then, we'll have a better idea of whether we want to form a subcommittee and whether any of the task force members are interested in being on that subcommittee. And maybe we'll get that clearer when we have the briefing from sanitation next month.
Okay.
Okay. Do any of the task force members have an interest in any of these topic areas in serving on a subcommittee?
Hey, this is Armin. I would certainly be interested in the Forward Dallas plan / zoning items. And I want to suggest, I think one thing I learned recently through something a council member set up was the CPC is limited in when it can approve and not approve zoning cases. And I guess one concern that it raised for me is that even if something was clearly bad for the environment, if it was legally allowed, my understanding is CPC would have to approve it. And so I'm just wondering if there's something we can look at to change that process or add more considerations or incentives so that that wouldn't be the case. And I'm wondering if that can also be part of that conversation.
Well, I know that on floodplain cases, if an applicant meets all of the criteria, the city actually has no choice but to approve their application unless the city chooses to buy the land back from them. So, I mean, that's something that the council is always faced with is you can either approve it because it meets all of the stated criteria, or you can buy the land. So generally, we usually approve it if it meets all the criteria. But that's something, I guess there are some limitations to how much freedom the Plan Commission has to say no. But that's an interesting topic you bring up that maybe could be considered. But I know there are some state rules that govern some of what the Plan Commission does. And so there again is the state that tells us what we can and cannot do. So RMN would be interested in the Forward Dallas. I would be interested in that too. Are there any other task force members that see any of the items here that they would like to participate in a subcommittee, or that you have the time to do? We have so much expertise on this task force that we wanted to be sure to offer you an opportunity if you had the time and the inclination to serve on something that you have an interest in. And I think that several of you, like I said, had signed up for the building code update, so we can get you going on that as part of that.
I would be interested in Forward Dallas as well.
Okay.
Alan, is that you?
Yes.
Okay.
On the building committee, I have an additional question. I know that my friends in sustainable development have some multiple committees with and without developers where they are working on that. Would you anticipate doing an internal with us, or would you prefer that we get you joined to the larger committee? I think it might be helpful to get you joined with the larger committee.
For the Forward Dallas issues?
For the building code issue.
For the building code issue.
I'm sorry?
That's really not my specialty.
Okay.
I mean, I'm really more I'm building a real high level. So understanding the minimum standards is hard for me. So,
okay.
So I don't like to play in that space. So,
okay.
But,
so you're more into the zoning and development codes and things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excuse me. And on the citywide tree task force, Sue, again, were there any opportunities for anyone who might want to serve on that?
And I'm sorry?
On the citywide tree task force that's going to tackle the emerald ash borer issue, are there any opportunities for anyone to serve on that if they wanted to? It seems, I know you said you showed us that whole list of agencies, nonprofits, and partners that have been part of that effort so far, but that effort is going to move forward through the citywide tree task force. Is there any opportunity for task force members on this task force to serve on that?
I would anticipate yes, but I would also anticipate that decision-making is going to be made by likely those departments that are actively involved. So we're happy to make some recommendations of our task force members that have an interest and some background and would like to help, understanding that we haven't figured it out yet.
Well, I mean, I've gotten that message pretty clearly, is that those 4 departments would like to have purview over that decision. But I also think it would be helpful before it goes in front of council to have some outside input on that.
That makes sense.
So-
Joey, do you have any thoughts on that?
Is the question whether we're open to having task force members join in the citywide task force for?
That's my question. Yes.
I'd say yes is the answer. The question is, how soon will we have that citywide task force formed? My thinking is that we would go back to the council committee no later than their May meeting at this point. I don't know that we will have the citywide task force finalized as we do the internal city staff task force. But Mrs. Grayson, I'd say absolutely. If someone's interested, then let us know on your task force, because we will get there, and we're trying to get there sooner rather than later.
So when I saw an answer to a council member's question in a memo, they had talked about the end of February. Was that for the internal group to get organized by the end of February? Because it was
Yes.
hard
Yes.
for me to tell from the answer in the memo whether that was the whole citywide task force or whether the 4 internal departments.
Correct, internally. And internally, we've already been meeting for a while. It's just that we're adding a new layer to it. We've had a technical committee of city foresters, and now we've got executive management leadership meeting regularly, weekly actually at this point. So correct, what you read in the memo was internal.
Okay, that wasn't really clear, but I got that impression. Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. If you all would please let Sue know before our meeting in April whether there's any of these areas that you would like to do more with, that you would personally like to be more involved with, and we'll be sure to look into that and see if that is doable. I mean, it would be a mother investment of time, but if you really want to, we want you to be able to participate if you want to. So with that, Sue, do you have anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. I would tell you, task force members, I kind of hate to get into the buildings and energy with only 15 minutes left, 15, 20 minutes left. What do you think, Sue?
Either one of those presentations could take a whole session. And I know that we have folks on the task force that have a very strong interest in both. I would suggest that we, if everyone's amenable, maybe delay that to the next meeting so that we can dive in and really give it the attention it deserves.
Will we have enough time at the next meeting to do that if we're also going to have a presentation from sanitation?
We should. Their presentation, I believe we told them 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it's an update of where they are on the process and what they're doing to move forward and kind of where some of the programmatic emphasis that they're working on. And a lot of that comes out of the public comments we received for the waste sector out of the CCAP. So I think we should have time to be able to at least get through one of them in pretty good order. I'm noticing in the chat that Rita is suggesting postponing. And I'm open to that. We can dive in if you'd like, but I'm just worried that we're not going to get very far.
Yeah, that's what my concern was too, is that if we give one of the briefings and we get done with that, we won't have any time for questions.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many people interested in this, and I see some hands up. Jeanette, I saw your hand up.
I got a question because our meetings are always really full. Is there any way that we could record some of these presentations and then we can watch them before we come to the meetings? And then have them at the meetings, and then we can ask questions? It's just an idea.
That's an idea that I had
That's
when
an
I chaired a
idea.
council committee once, but the problem with that is that they said then the public doesn't get to see them. And since we record these meetings and the public gets to see the briefing and then here's our questions, they wouldn't see the briefing. So, you know, if we watched it prior to the meeting, that was what I was advised about when I suggested that in the interest of time, we do the presentation offline and that we just make sure that we reviewed the presentation. So that's a concern, is the way the public wouldn't hear it.
Okay.
Michael? Michael, you had your hand up.
You're on mute.
You. There we go.
Why, there it goes. I don't know why it's not responding. Okay, no, as I communicated with you, Sandy, in the last few weeks, clearly what happened recently in February was a real disaster relative to building and energy. So I just see urgency on this topic. While it's on top of people's minds, in front of mind, we got to figure out how we get ready for the next version of what happened. And buildings and energy are a big part of that. So I know we're the implementation planning committee. It's kind of strategic, but I also can't help but think tactically about what can come out of this group that should be passed on for action sooner than later. My point was around, you know, incentives, promotion, public service announcements, whatever it is. So we get stuff happening now or sooner than later so that our community is just better prepared to survive. And for some people, it was truly survival. And for the rest of it was, you know, intense and bad. So that's my point about that topic of buildings and energy, and when and where and how we can have a good discussion about it, what this group thinks we should do on those related topics.
What we wanted to be sure we did, though, was give it the time that it deserves. And we had no choice but to move forward in February with the making sure that we had our set of recommendations for the Environmental Commission, the Permanent Commission. That was something that we had to finish. And by the way, before we leave, and I touched on that, I just want to thank you all. I hope you had a chance to read Sue's memo. The council committee was very pleased with our work on that. I don't think they made any changes to any of our recommendations, and they directed the city attorney's office to put it into ordinance form. So I think we all did good work, and I want to thank you all so much for that. Because like I said, it was well received by the council committee, and the chair was very, very appreciative. Okay, Maria, I think I saw your hand up.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I was late. I was in another meeting, but
it's fine. It was good. We saw you came, yeah.
Yeah, and then I have a question that might be like out there, but as this, I did read Susan's memo. I was very happy that what we did was taken the right way, and they adopted it and they moved it forward. I think that's a lot of satisfaction of what we've been doing. But what is our role? How once this committee, or I mean this task force gets implemented, do we fade out of the process? I mean, I'm just trying to ask, I'm trying to figure out, does this team have a time where we are absorbed or dissolved?
I think so, Maria. I think our original request was that we address those two issues and we would exist for 1 year as a task force. And then the task force would go away because it would be transitioned into the Permanent Environmental Commission, on which we could certainly offer to serve if some of us would like to do that. But I believe that we had a time frame of 1 year.
So when is that year due?
Well, I believe it would be August would be our final meeting. And and usually committees don't meet in July. The city goes on recess in July. So we would probably have April, May, June, and August left. We'd have like 4 meetings left. Now, there may be a way that they would like to see us continue. They, meaning the Council's Environmental Committee, would like to see us continue. But the original idea is that we would go away once the Permanent Commission was formed and nominations were made.
Perfect. And I just think we have to be very wise about how we use those next 4 meetings.
Oh, I know. And it turns out that we had so many more requests for us to review things than we ever thought we would in the beginning. We thought we would just be working on those two things, recommending which action items should be budgeted for the next year for OEQS for the CCAP, and to make a set of recommendations to form a permanent commission. But council members have asked us to review so many other things that, which I think is good because they appreciate the value of this group of people. But that's one reason why our agendas have been so full and that we've even had to start pushing items to the next month, is because of council member requests that we look at all kinds of different things that we never thought we were going to do originally.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Who's next?
Ariman?
Ariman?
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I think it seems like we're moving towards postponing, and I think that makes sense so we can have a full conversation. And I think the one other thing, and I think it is in our forecast, but I just wanted to just reiterate maybe, is I think it would be nice for us to take a look at what kind of the next year's plan might be when it's still, there's still some time to make adjustments, because I know when budgets come out in August, it's harder
That
sometimes.
on our forecast for April
We
and
would
May.
love that. I think it would be really
Yes.
helpful.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm
Yes.
fingers crossed with the funding that was just passed in the federal government. Maybe there's some additional funding coming to the city of Dallas that might flow into some of the priorities we would want to work on. So
Unless the state tells us we can't do it.
yes, I really hope.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, more state
Okay,
things.
but good thought, good thought. Thank you. But we do have that on our forecast, is to work on the action items to be budgeted for the next year for the CCAP. So that is part of our upcoming meetings. We have very full agendas. And the next person, Katie, with their hand up. Is there anyone else?
No, Ariman was the last person to have their hand up.
Okay. With that, then, not seeing any other hands up, I think we will wrap up today's meeting, and we will have another full agenda in April. And thank you all again for all of your participation. Really is appreciated. I know staff and the council committee was very interested in getting our input on this urban forest master plan, which is just such a wonderful effort. So thank you all very much. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And that is Alan?
Mhm.
And
Okay.
Maria Bocalandro seconds.
Thank you, Maria. So we have a motion and a second, and the meeting is adjourned at 2:52 p.m. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Take care.